Welcome back to Ben's Book Club. Today, we are diving into the book Dare to Lead. We're taking a really deep dive into Brené Brown's groundbreaking research, and it completely flips everything we thought we knew about corporate power dynamics on its head. Her core premise? It's incredibly empowering. Courage isn't some fixed personality trait you're just born with. No way. It's a teachable, measurable, and highly actionable skill set. You can literally learn to be a brave leader. And in this explainer, we're going to look exactly at how to do that using her visual frameworks.
Okay, let's dive into this. We've got a great roadmap for this explainer. First, we'll shatter the myth of the armor. Then, we'll walk step by step through 4 really concrete frameworks: rumbling with vulnerability, living into values, braving trust, and finally, learning to rise.
Section 1. The Myth of the Armor, Swapping Protection for Connection.
For decades, the corporate world has sold us this idea that a brave leader is an invulnerable, know-it-all boss who never shows a single ounce of weakness. And this brilliantly illustrates the difference. When we feel threatened or insecure at work, we instinctively put on this heavy 20-ton armor. We rely on perfectionism, we hoard power, we demand absolute certainty, and we lean hard into cynicism when things get tough. Sure, that massive shield protects our comfort, but it completely blocks real connection. Daring leadership? It's the total opposite. It replaces that heavy shield with an open, curious stance. It's all about sharing power, leaning into learning instead of knowing everything, and building grounded confidence. Basically, it's swapping the need to be right for the desire to get it right.
Which brings us to a phrase you'll hear repeated a lot, because it is a total game changer for workplace communication: clear is kind, unclear is unkind. Think about it. Have you ever given someone vague, watered-down feedback just because you wanted to be nice and spare their feelings? Well, the research argues that feeding people those half-truths is actually just a form of self-protection. You're protecting your own comfort by dodging a tough conversation. Being truly kind means respecting someone enough to give them direct, clear feedback, even when it feels super uncomfortable for you to say it out loud.
Skill 1. Rumbling with vulnerability.
So, we need to completely rethink how we view vulnerability at work. It's absolutely not a weakness. In fact, it's the birthplace of courage, innovation, and real connection. You literally cannot have courage without vulnerability. It means leaning into uncertainty, risk, and emotional exposure instead of running away from it. To put this into practice, Brown introduces the concept of a rumble. A rumble is just an honest conversation grounded in curiosity rather than defensiveness. It's a dedicated space where everyone agrees to tackle messy, difficult topics without shutting down. When you sit down to rumble, your primary goal shifts. You're no longer trying to be right. A brave leader enters a rumble aiming to get it right, which means leaving your ego at the door and getting deeply curious about someone else's perspective.
Notice the core distinction here between shame and guilt. Guilt says, I did something bad. It focuses on the behavior, right? Something you can fix. But shame says, I am bad. It attacks a person's core identity. Shame-based corporate cultures, where mistakes are weaponized, and people are made to feel fundamentally flawed, they absolutely crush innovation. People just shut down, because the emotional risk of failing is way too high. To build daring teams, leaders have to replace that shame with empathy. Empathy is the antidote. It fuels connection and makes it safe for people to take risks again.
Skill 2. Living into values.
You know, it's so common for organizations to have this long, beautifully designed list of aspirational values hanging in the lobby or printed on coffee mugs, but nobody actually follows them. That's completely useless. Brave leaders don't just state their values, they operationalize them in their daily actions and their toughest decisions. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is a surprising constraint called the rule of 2. The research proves you don't get a list of 10 core values. You get 2. The constraint is the whole point. If you have a list of 10 or 15 core values, nothing is actually a priority. By forcing yourself down to just 2, you pinpoint the absolute bedrock principles that guide you when everything is hitting the fan. If all else is stripped away, these are the 2 things you absolutely will not compromise on.
Skill 3. Braving trust.
Once those values are clear, we have to build trust around them. We usually think trust is forged in these massive, dramatic moments of crisis, but the data actually shows trust is built and broken in tiny, everyday interactions. Think of it like a marble jar on a teacher's desk. Every time you follow through, every time you really listen, you put a marble in the jar. Over time, it adds up. But trust is pretty abstract, which makes it hard to manage. So breaking it down into a concrete, measurable checklist gives us the BRVNGZine framework. B is for boundaries, respecting each other's limits. R is reliability, doing what you say you'll do every single time. A is accountability, owning your mistakes and fixing them. V is the vault, keeping confidences and refusing to gossip. I stands for integrity, choosing courage over comfort. N is non-judgment, making it totally safe to ask for help. And G is generosity, assuming the absolute best intentions in others. Using this checklist, you can evaluate exactly where trust is breaking down on your team, focusing on specific behaviors instead of just throwing around vague accusations.
Skill 4. Learning to rise. Most conventional leadership training out there only teaches people how to handle failure after they've already crashed. The daring leadership approach argues that we need to teach leaders how to fall before they even step into the arena. Resilience isn't about avoiding failure. It's about having a practiced process for getting back up when you inevitably hit the ground. A huge part of that resilience is managing our own internal narratives, specifically what Brown calls the shitty first draft, or SFD. When something goes wrong, like say a colleague doesn't reply to an urgent email for a whole day, our brains absolutely hate the uncertainty. So we instantly invent a wild story to make sense of it. And usually in that first draft story, we are either the helpless victim or the righteous villain, right? Oh, they're ignoring me because they hate my project, or they're totally trying to sabotage my presentation. By stopping and asking yourself, what is the story I am telling myself right now, you force your brain to pause and fact-check those emotions before you fire off an angry defensive response based entirely on fiction.
So, as we wrap up these 4 skills, I want to leave you with this final, provocative thought. What would change at work if leaders cared more about courage than looking in control? Just imagine the innovation, the trust, and the speed at which teams could operate if we all just dropped that armor. I want to challenge you right now. Identify one tough conversation you've been putting off. Write your 2 core values on a sticky note, look at them, and schedule that rumble for this week. Remember, clear is kind. Take that step and subscribe so you don't miss an episode.